How is it going, everybody? I know by now most people have probably moved on from Star Wars Jedi Survivor. I already recorded the skits months ago. I have my review drafted out, so I just wanted to get this up for my own sake at this point. But leave any feedback down in the comment section below. And for those of you that do stick by to watch it, thank you, and I hope you enjoy. Oh, there you are, dude. Please, listen, let's just go back home. It's raining. It's disgusting. I don't even know what you're doing out here. We'll go try out the new Star Wars Jedi Survivor game. I hear it's actually pretty fun, and we'll forget this ever happened. Why bother? There are no good Star Wars games anymore. No, I've actually kind of started playing it by myself, and it's actually pretty good. Knights of the Old Republic, Star Wars Jedi Academy, the original Star Wars Battlefront 2, those were the glory days of Star Wars games, and EA has squandered them, fallen to the darkness by their own hubris, unable to make a good Star Wars game. Alright, let me just put this into maybe some phrasing that you'll understand, or a scenario that you'll understand a bit better, okay? Just... But it's by Respawn! They're the chosen ones! They're meant to bring balance to Star Wars games, not destroy them! You're not with me. My allegiance is to trying things out for yourself, to subjectivity! Then you're my enemy! Okay, dude, what is that? What are you even doing anymore? I hate you! Okay, first off, we're not even at that scene yet, but second, if you're gonna act out like this, at least get one of the nice ones. What'd you get that, a $5 clearance rack at Target? I mean, seriously. You can't afford one of the nice, cool ones. This is... Come on, man. Alright, listen, just come back. We'll try out the new Star Wars game together. We'll forget whatever this is, and I'll get you an actual nice lightsaber. How's that sound? Fine, I'll try out the damn stupid Star Wars. Yeah, cool.
I'm not gonna like it.
Yes, Respawn, yet again coming back with a second incredibly amazing Star Wars Jedi experience. They have not one, but two fantastic games in a series that's meant to be a trilogy, and it's only gotten me more excited for this third and final game that's going to eventually come in Cal Kestis' journey. I'm here with my knockoff lightsaber because that is all I can afford, but let me just say, Respawn, give yourselves a pat on the back because you guys earned it.
Oh, can I tell you one thing? It's really good seeing you again.
Cal Kestis and the Mantis crew are back yet again for another epic adventure, and the comparisons that people are making to Arkham City, what that was to Arkham Asylum, are absolutely true.
It's all true.
Star Wars Jedi Survivor takes almost everything that Jedi Fallen Order did well and improves it. You have a new, darker story that takes you to some pretty deep places. You have incredible character development, rich combat with brand new force abilities that you can use, all wrapped up in a tighter, cleaner combat experience in this new world with new characters to explore, and just all around, it was absolutely delightful to play. Now, of course, there are some things that I do have my complaints about that I'll be voicing here in this review. There is naturally the performance issues that we can't get around, but there's simply so much here to praise than there is to complain about that I'm so excited to finally be doing this review. But before we jump into the first part of this review on the story, Respawn has taken everything that I loved about Jedi Fallen Order, cranked it up to 11, and it absolutely should be considered as a Game of the Year contender. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my review of Star Wars Jedi Survivor. So it's interesting, I mentioned that there's a lot of things, there's more to praise about this game than I do have complaints, and kicking it off with the story, I'm going to vocalize some of those things that I thought weren't done so well. Overall, when you take the entire experience, which you absolutely should wait until the end of the game before making any judgments about the story, it does, as you can assume, meander quite a bit. It's not until the third act that the game really cranks it up to the level that you were hoping that it got to for other parts of the experience. There's not really a very clear beginning, middle, and end. This entire game, if I'm being honest, from a storytelling perspective, at least to me, felt like the middle, which is appropriate given that it's the second game out of a trilogy, but you don't want it to feel like the entire game is just the middle part of your book or your story or chapter. The story absolutely is middling for quite a while, and while the objective is clear, you know what you're trying to do, there's elements that are twisted into this narrative that really don't always work out. It's not really quite a great race, but it's more like a tug of war as you and the antagonists of this game are fighting over the MacGuffin that you're trying to get, and it leads to kind of an inconsistent feeling experiences up until you get to that third and final act of the game. And some people aren't going to like that. And I think one of the main problems with it comes from the fact that the antagonist is arguably, well, the premise of the antagonist in this game is really damn cool. You awaken this old Jedi from a time long before you, and he has his own goals and motivations that, as we've seen in the trailers, no spoilers here, ends up becoming your enemy. But throughout the story, the main antagonist of the game really doesn't seem to care about you, and that's fine, at least for the beginning when you're seeing him and meeting him for the first time. He says, "Oh, let the droids handle him, you're not worth my time." But eventually, when you start beating his droids and beating his thugs, you'd think he'd come around and be like, "I need to stop Cal Kestis." But it never actually gets to that point. Instead, just the entire experience to me kind of felt like you were just so inconsequential to him. As the hero of the story, made me feel inconsequential. It makes Cal Kestis as a character feel less integral to the overall story, that you could have plopped him in with literally any other character, doesn't even need to be a Jedi, and the story still would have worked perfectly fine, because the dynamic between the antagonist to the protagonist wasn't, well, they were a foil for one another. The conflict between them was never necessarily the driving force, and in that way, the story actually lends itself a lot better to the character development of the people in this story. So it's weird, it's interesting. As a result, the pacing did feel all over the place. Now, when I do say that the third act really kicked things up, it was the best part of the game, hands down, from a narrative perspective, and I just wished more of it was like that because it was so incredible. Now, does that make the entire rest of the journey worthwhile? The answer is absolutely yes.
Hey, honey, do you want to go do something together? What in the world is going on in here? How long have you been in here for?
What day is it?
You need to get out of here. Let's go do something together. We should do something together.
BD1, what do we do?
We should go do something together. Because I
You
haven't
want to
seen
watch
you
Desperate Housewives
in days.
with your
I don't
friends.
watch Desperate Housewives.
You want to go watch episodes of Friends to talk about with your coworkers.
No, I want to go do something with you.
You want to leave me alone so I can keep playing Star Wars.
I would rather you do something with me.
The story spends a lot of time working towards building up these characters, development of them. Again, when I say it feels like the middle part of the story, the entire game genuinely does feel that way, which is a strong opportunity for the personalities of these characters to really come alive. And whether it's Merrin, Grease, Seer, Cal, some of the new characters that do get introduced in this entry, all of them get a fantastic amount of time in the spotlight. It really does do them justice, and you see tons of growth between where they started in Jedi Fallen Order and where they are now in Star Wars Jedi Survivor, since the game takes place several years after the events of the last game. At the heart of Star Wars Jedi Survivor is this very personal and meaningful character story that's going to resonate a lot more with some people than others, but for me, by the end of the experience, it came together nicely. Some people might not feel as though the payoff was worth it. And what I really enjoyed about the story was Cal feels as though the position of Jedi Knight was warranted. He has earned that after everything he's gone through, and it shows in the way that he handles himself, how he carries himself, the position that he is at the start of this game, all the way throughout the whole experience, and how he mentally approaches certain situations. There's growth there. Now, a big part of Star Wars Jedi Survivor is the open world. Jedi Fallen Order had much more linear planets. There were plenty of side avenues to explore. Some of them were rather large, such as Kashyyyk in Jedi Fallen Order, but Jedi Survivor says, hey, we're going semi-open world with this one, and you get introduced to the planet Kobo. Some people are gonna love the sprawling open fields of Kobo, being able to explore all these different areas, nooks and crannies, with the addition of mounts that you could use to not only get around faster, but access areas that otherwise you normally couldn't. It really does change up the pacing of exploration in the game in a good way. You'll be traversing through mountain peaks above the clouds to boggy swamps underneath, but to me, it never really had that same diversity that going from Zepho to Dathomir and Dathomir to Kashyyyk had in the first game. And in that way, I actually sort of preferred having the wider variety of planets to explore in the first game than what we got here. Part of that absolutely does come down to the enemy types. In Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, you would see all different enemies based on the planets you went to. And then, of course, an area like Kashyyyk wasn't just one single biome. Kashyyyk had multiple micro-environments within it, versus Kobo, where you're coming across the same enemies. Now, mind you, there's a massive variety of them, so I'm not complaining about that. But you're coming across the same ones just in different areas that never had that far of a stretch of diversity that different planets did. But that's not to say there weren't things I loved about Kobo. I loved coming back to seeing the same faces. You constantly return. All roads in Star Wars Jedi Survivor lead back to Kobo at one point or another. And I love this sort of settlement building kind of element to the game where you get these rumors that you'll come across in Grease's bar that you get to hang out in, and they'll give you rumors to go explore some of the furthest reaches of the planet, some of the real nooks and crannies, to find out what's going on with rumors. And you'll be rewarded either by experience, by getting additional health, or by finding new NPCs that might come to hang out at the bar. And these NPCs were interesting. It made the whole thing feel sprawling with activity. I usually detest these types of moments in games where you have these generic characters that tell these kind of generic stories, but the ones here, they were interesting. The rumors that you get provided as a destination, as a marker of to where to go on Kobo, are a great prompt, but ultimately every single time I felt as though I was appropriately rewarded for going off and exploring those areas of the map, whether it was in the form of new NPCs or these level ups or the myriad of cosmetics and customization that is absolutely insane in Star Wars Jedi Survivor. But before we jump into that part of the game, just more of the things you could do in Kobo. There's this ranch where if you find our particular Neko, one of the creatures that you can ride on Kobo, you could actually store them in the stables if there is a color that you like, and you could retrieve them later. That was a nice little touch. Instead of the small terrarium that you had in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order on the Mantis, there's an entire garden that you can plant and a botanist you can find to tell you about all the plants if you're interested. There's a fish tank with this Scottish alien fisherman that tells you all these stories that he goes on, which is one of my favorite parts of the game, was listening to his tales, even though I couldn't understand him half the time.
Highland Saloon? That'll ever infested watering hole down in your valley.
All right. Did I ask?
Ah, fine, twist my arm. I'll do it. Meet me at the saloon and we'll appraise this so-called tank.
There's these holo tables. You could take part in these simulated battles for some fun and to get some rewards if you're interested. There's an entire bounty hunting mini quest side adventure you can go on where you just collect bounty pucks and you bring them back to get other rewards. And if you are at all going to try out Jedi Survivor, do the bounty hunting quests. It's worth your time. Then there's the music tracks. You can find these tracks either by buying them from vendors using unique currency, or you can just discover them out in the world. You bring it back to Grease's bar, and then you could have them play on the radio or on the stereo, the DJ booth, while you're going around doing your business, talking to NPCs, learning some new rumors. It's all around just a great thing to come back to, and they wouldn't be able to do that if they didn't provide you a reason to go back constantly to Kobo. So in that way, the open world's great. But again, there are some annoying things. With this open world design, I did run into one blaring issue that I actually somewhat have a problem with, but one just inconvenience, I will say. First off, there are moments, it's Metroidvania in style, as the first game was. So there's moments where you'll get a brand new upgrade. For example, this ability to dash through these green laser barriers you can now cross. And you'll have that ability only to find that immediately behind that wall is another barrier that you need another gadget in order to get through. It just made exploration feel a bit annoying at times, that you get rewarded only to not be able to do the thing that you want to do. And then just additionally, another grievance I had, which is a climactic moment in the story that takes place on Kobo. You're able to get about 60% of the way to this specific area before you need a particular gadget. And so while it would have led to this really great storytelling as you go through these different environments, get into these different combat encounters, and you just build your way up to that location, since I had explored there before, unlocked a fast travel point, without knowing, I just fast traveled there by the time it came up in the story, and I didn't realize that I kind of missed all the other stuff because I didn't do it in the right order in a way. It kind of just sucks, and my advice would generally be to wait to explore till you get towards the end of the game. Also scattered across Kobo are these puzzle chambers in the form of Jedi meditation chambers. So similar to the vaults that we had in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, these come back as optional things that you can complete in Star Wars Jedi Survivor. While none of them were really ever that taxing, and I do wish that they were a little bit more in depth, a little bit more detailed, smaller quantity, but more to them, I think would have gone a long way here, as I actually didn't mind the vaults as some people did in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, but I was appreciative that they were here. They added a nice distraction, they always had a good reward at the end, and it does help to play out some of the storytelling, some of the details behind the scenes that aren't essential to know, but make you feel rewarded that you do. Before we get into what is arguably the best part of the game, which is unquestionably the combat, I do want to be sure to talk a little bit about the music and the sound design in the game. For the music, it is returning back to Gordy Hobb and Stephen Barton's soundtrack. They worked on it for Jedi Fallen Order. They're back again to work on the game for Jedi Survivor, and they do an absolutely stellar job. They capture the tone during the dark moments of the game. It helps bring those out, makes them feel even darker. During the bright exploration moments, you have this beautiful ambient soundtrack that's going on in the background. So absolutely great from a music perspective. And of course, I usually rate music, to be honest, whether or not I listen to it outside of the game. This absolutely I would. It's just as good as it was in Jedi Fallen Order. The sound design was incredible. There's a lot of small details and nuances. I really did appreciate the fact that the different kyber crystals that you could put in the lightsaber actually make different sound effects, so that was pretty neat, but that type of attention to detail when it comes to sound permeates throughout the entire experience. And then there's of course the performances from the actors doing the motion capture. Cameron Monaghan as Cal Kestis, Deborah Wilson as Seer Junda, you have Bode Akun played by Noshir Dalal, Daniel Roebuck playing Grease. Easy money, baby, and they all did absolutely incredible. The expression, the emotion that they're able to draw out was done stellar, and I have to say, maybe this is just me projecting, but it did genuinely feel as though in this game the crew was meant to be a little bit closer. Of course, they went their separate ways, we see that in the opening of the game, but they should feel like they've known each other for longer, and the performances when all the characters are together in the same place really does feel as though they've known each other for a very long time, that they've been through a lot of stuff together.
Tonight, a warm fire is perfect. And the company is not so bad either.
I missed you, Marin.
And I you.
Again, maybe it's just me projecting, maybe it's the fact that the actors actually got more comfortable working with one another, but their performances all were standout, cinematic, AAA quality that you would come to expect from a game like this. And now the juicy part of this review, which is the expanded and monumentally improved combat that's present in Star Wars Jedi Survivor. This game, like I mentioned early on in this review, it does exactly what Arkham City did to Arkham Asylum, where it takes a fantastic combat system and improves it in almost every single possible way. It makes it feel tighter and cleaner and much better. It gives you new abilities and powers and level up skill trees to go down and new ways to play the character, and it all culminates into one of the most satisfying Souls-like combat experiences that I've personally ever played. Now, mind you, my Souls-like experience is very limited to Dark Souls and Elden Ring. I haven't played games like Bloodborne or others, so do keep that in mind, but it feels polished, it feels clean, and you genuinely feel powerful right from the get-go. Again, when I mentioned from a narrative perspective that Cal Kestis really does feel like he's earned that position of Jedi Knight, you feel a similar way when it comes to his total power in Star Wars Jedi Survivor. He not only retains a lot of the Force abilities that he had, well, all the Force abilities.
Okay, now just throw it
I can't.
and use the Force to call it back to you.
That was the last game, I can't do that anymore.
What do you mean you can't? So just throw it and then use the Force and
Okay,
call-
fine, here we go.
It's not that hard. Dude, what the f just happened?
Told you! That he had in the previous game, they also can be upgraded and improved in new and creative ways to turn the tide against your enemies. There are 3 new stances that are present in Star Wars Jedi Survivor. You have the blaster stance, where you'll be wielding your lightsaber more as a fencer or a duelist, and a blaster in the other hand to do some ranged combos. That comes with this unique ability, like this Deadeye type system that you could use similar to Red Dead. You have the crossguard stance, which gives slow but heavy blows to decimate some of your foes, and then you also have the dual wielding stance for quick lightning strikes to really break down some of your enemy's guards. And the cool thing about each of these stances, they all have their own totally unique skill trees to level them up with, but additionally they also have their own pros and cons to using them. Of course, the single bladed stance still remains my favorite, and that's the one that I honestly use throughout almost the whole playthrough, but I do have to mention that each of them have their pros and cons when it comes to the enemy types as well. You might find that you're going up against a certain enemy, maybe you want to try out a new stance for a little bit, see if it works better on them, because it does play to some different strengths. In that way, the enemy design was really incredibly done, and the variety of enemies that you go against was completely massive, from the wide array of different types of droids, from the commando droids to the B2 super battle droids, the B1, the normal infantry that we all love with the humorous comedy, again with the same voice actor from the Clone Wars animated TV series.
Here, guarding. It's boring. When will we get some action? I want to put down some insurgents. Our orders are to guard, not to hunt. Come on, aren't you even a little bored? My circuits are seizing up. My blaster could use field calibration. But that is not the point. Remain at your post.
You have tons of new exciting variants of the Empire troops with new Imperial security droids that you can go up against. There's also the new Dark Troopers that are absolutely terrifying and menacing to go up against until you get the right powers to deal with them. And of course, the return of classics. You have some of the Purge Troopers coming back again, the classic Stormtroopers that you get to mow down at times, and all of it, the Stun Baton Troopers, the Commandos, and all that great stuff is all here. So expanding the roster of some of those old creatures and units and bringing in a bunch of new ones, especially when it comes to the wildlife and the creatures that you go up against. Damarco, Biolmaws, Mogu, and tons of other creature types that you're going to come across, mostly when you're exploring throughout Kobo. And again, you'll see some variations of them at different parts of the environment, so they do come up time and time again. But then you also have some other creative ones that you'll find on other planets that you get to explore. Not going to spoil any of that here, but it's definitely a great expansion to an already wide library of enemy types to go up against. Really curious about what we're going to go up against. We've done the battle droids, we've done, of course, the Empire troops, we have already had the wildlife, so what new group of enemies is coming in the sequel? Clone troopers? That wouldn't make any sense. I never got bored of fighting any one enemy type because there's just so much variety here, and the fun combat system that, again, it just feels tighter, it feels more polished, it hits connect better on top of the new force abilities, makes it all feel rewarding that you wanted to engage in the combat as much as possible. Then you had these nice breaks where you would meet the new NPCs, go back to Grease's Tavern, talk with your companions, that sort of thing, before going off and doing it again, and it all felt great. It was a fantastic gameplay loop. I will also say I beat this entire game on Jedi Grandmaster difficulty, and as a whole, because the game felt more polished, it did also feel a lot more fair in that regard. Now, when it does come to a couple boss fights, the game does this small issue that I do want to talk about, specifically with the final boss fight on the highest difficulty, where they have this absurd amount of block that you have to get through, so you have to just lay on hit after hit after hit in order to drain their guard before you get 1, maybe 2 attacks off on the enemy. And this wouldn't be a problem if you could use the force powers to your advantage, but unfortunately, at those harder boss fights, they just ward off every single force power that you possibly throw at them, especially because a lot of the bosses have multiple stages. So not only is the enemy itself, because you could see as you slide through the different difficulties that it increases the enemy aggression, so you're under this constant onslaught of blows that gives you very little timing. That was fun, that was tense, but I think there's a better balance that can be struck where you feel as though the powers that you've earned are actually worthwhile and you can use them against your enemies. And I don't know the proper way to do this, but I would start maybe by having the AI cycle through certain powers that you can expose it with throughout various points of the fight. So if I'm consistently trying to use force push over and over, eventually the AI says, nope, not going to let that happen. I need to shake it up with either force lift or pull or any other ability that I have access to. But instead, because they just shrug off every single attack you mostly do to them, it really does, this very cinematic combat experience ends up boiling down to this really heavy metagaming experience where you have to watch, find their patterns, dodge, attack at the right moment, rinse and repeat for 15-minute boss fights, sometimes longer, before you actually complete them. It really takes away from this natural ebb and flow that a lot of the other situations in combat have, because the enemies don't have either this massive amount of block or these gargantuan health pools that you have to chip away at. Another massive area that Jedi Survivor has improved on its predecessor is the customization. In Jedi Fallen Order, you had ponchos that you could cycle through. That was it. And thankfully, the team at Respawn listened to the feedback and they went nuts with the amount of customization that's available here. I'm probably going to forget to mention some, but on top of what you've already experienced in the last game with customizing your lightsaber, now you have the additional blaster that you could customize. You have all the different types of materials that you can go through similar before, but the colors and the way that you can shade your lightsaber is improved vastly. That applies to BD1 as well. There's more customizable parts than you ever had before, especially with specific stances such as the crossguard, where you can actually change the vents of that lightsaber and the angle that they protrude at. It's just absolutely bewildering. The condition of your lightsaber end of BD1, whether they're very well kept and pristine or they're well worn, the vast amounts of character visual customization for Cal on its own, from shirt to hair to beard to pants, everything. Oddly enough, the mantis isn't customizable this time around. I guess not even really with colors, you're just stuck with the default style, which was interesting, but I didn't mind at all when I had everything else that I could literally change to my liking. And it really did make Cal feel personal to me, even though he's this established character within the universe. And it's worth mentioning that all of this is completely free. It's just in the base game. There's no microtransactions. There's some pre-order bonuses that tie into it. In the deluxe edition, you'll get like 1 or 2 extra goodies, but almost all of it is just in the game. I think there's around, without the deluxe edition or anything like that, I think there's around 10 parts in each category that you can cycle through, which when you have this much horizontal customization that you can do across all these different elements, that's more than enough. The developers completely outdid themselves here, and I can't wait to see it. It doesn't even need to change for the next one. It will. I want to see new things, but it's just, how do you get better from here? I hate to end the review this way, but it does need to be said. I had some complaints about the story, which all in all weren't that bad, because by the end I came to love it. There's some elements with the combat and the boss fights that I brought up, but those really pale in comparison to the entirety of this game that I absolutely adored. But even though this review's coming out very late, I do need to touch on the bugs and the performance at launch, because quite frankly, the way that the state that this game launched in is unacceptable. I understand that game development is very difficult, and I'm not trying to be an armchair developer here, and I'm not going to even go too far into this point because I know everybody's already expressed it, and there are patches that are making the game much more stable across Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. So yes, the post-development support is there, but if you're paying $70 upfront for any product, I would hope that the performance is stable and you're getting what you're paying for with a reliable product. And for some people, that wasn't the case. Even myself, I had enemies that would just flat out disappear sometimes. Running through Kobo on occasion was a bit of a nightmare just because I knew it would stutter completely uncontrollably. Cutscenes that would stutter as well. I had moments in cutscenes where the character models were just frozen in place. They didn't move, and that was for the whole thing. They fixed themselves once the gameplay started, but it just looked completely wonky. I can't put that specific scene on because it does contain spoilers, so I don't want to show it here. But the unfortunate reality is what an otherwise phenomenal game does have these unfortunate bars that are holding it back from being a perfect game, or a near perfect game even. And as someone reviewing the game, it would be a bit irresponsible, even though, again, I know they're getting patched out and the performance is monumentally better already than it was at launch. The game launched in that way. It would be irresponsible for me as a reviewer to not acknowledge that. And as we get into our final verdict, I have to say Star Wars Jedi Survivor was absolutely everything that I would have hoped for. Of course, performance issues are a thing that's objectively needed to be improved and that marred the launch of this game, but everything else I really mentioned was completely subjective. It's my own personal takes as far as the storytelling elements go, and what I don't like, others might. But the game had phenomenal character development, great growth, great music, great atmosphere, great combat system, improved customization, all wrapped up in a license and an IP that I love. I really do enjoy the Star Wars universe, and so Star Wars Jedi Survivor is a fantastic time. Sure, the story was a bit looser, it was more focused and tighter in the first game, and I preferred it a little bit over what we got in Jedi Survivor, but this, as a sequel, does everything else that it needed to do. And ultimately, it really does set the stage for the third and final entry, as we know, in this trilogy of Star Wars Jedi games, and I'm more excited than I ever have been to get another sequel. Additionally, I would have really liked to see a little bit more in the form of planet variety. While I did love Kobo, I honestly think I appreciated the completely distant and alien biomes that we got across different planets a little bit more. Ladies and gentlemen, the final score for Star Wars Jedi Survivor is going to be an 8 out of 10. It does a lot of things incredible. Bugs, performance issues, and the slightly looser story bring it down a little bit. The amazing combat and gameplay, the fantastic character development, the wonderful world building, all bring it and elevate it. And the customization bring that score up. There's so much to love here. Just talking about it, I want to jump back in for a second playthrough. And if you just take what Jedi Fallen Order did and Jedi Survivor and mash that together, easily I could see the third and final entry in this trilogy reaching a 10 out of 10 for me. And I cannot wait to see what Respawn does next. But for now, thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all next time. So long, everybody. I'm gonna go for a second playthrough.